Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the Neutron Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 15 of The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, The Eggpire Strikes Back. And as I said last week, this episode marks the return of the Yokians from the Jimmy Neutron movie. And I will give credit where it's due. This episode was hyped up when it was going to be aired on Nickelodeon, to the point where the episode itself is actually an hour-long special. Well, an hour long if you count commercials. Otherwise, I think it's like a 44-minute special. My point still stands, though. It's a much longer episode than your standard Jimmy Neutron episode, as instead of it being two segments, it's one whole segment, and like I said, hour long with commercials. So, you know, this was supposed to be a big deal. I think it sucks. Yeah, I'm gonna drop that bombshell right now. I don't really like this episode. I think I enjoyed it when I was a kid, but as an adult, well, let's just say it hasn't aged gracefully. How so? Well, let's get to our plot summary and find out. And what's going on is that while Jimmy is testing a new burp-powered jetpack with Carl as a test subject, because of course, Retroville is visited by the Yokians, as a Yokian ship ends up flying overhead on the town, and well, justifiably, everyone in Retroville starts freaking the hell out. Thankfully, Jimmy is able to rally the townspeople to where the ship is, and he ends up knocking it out of the sky by launching a tomato at basically the cockpit for the ship, and that basically causes whoever was flying the ship to get so distracted that he ends up crashing into the earth, and the ship is severely damaged. So, you know, it looks like things are going well. Only when the Yokians come out of the ship, they're not there to declare war, but rather they're waving the white flag of surrender, quite literally, as we see King Goobot V and Ooblar come out and say they're here for peace. Basically, what they're saying is that the reason why the Yokians were so evil in the Jimmy Neutron movie was because they were listening to Pultra. Well, Pultra is apparently no longer with the people of Yokis. That's their home planet. I think they mentioned it once in the movie, but I didn't remember it. But basically, without Pultra's influence, the Yokians are now all kind and friendly, and they want to make amends for all the terrible stuff they've done in the past. So they've come to Earth to make friends with the Earthlings, make peace, and as a show of good faith, they've given all the Earthlings gifts, which, yeah, at first, everyone in Retroville is a little hesitant to trust the egg guys that, you know, kidnapped the entire adult population of the town and tried to feed them to their giant chicken god. But all it takes is for them to get some nice presents, and they all basically go, well, water under the bridge, right? Of course you're welcome here. We accept your peace. And it's stupid. Yeah, I am not gonna beat around the bush. Everybody just accepts that the Yokians come in peace just because they gave them presents. Literally, the only person who doesn't buy that the Yokians that aren't up to anything is Jimmy himself. And yeah, the episode really doesn't really try to hide the fact that the Yokians are up to something, as King Goobot is still kind of twiddling his fingers, looking evil, smiling sinisterly when he thinks no one's looking, and likewise one of his subjects actually goes up to him and whispers to something, or goes up to Ooblar and whispers something, when Ooblar tells him, the you-know-what was damaged when the ship crashed, and it's clear this is supposed to be something secretive, so yeah, it's clear the Yokians are up to something, but quite literally, everyone in Retroville just trusts them just because they all got some nice gifts. And I'll give credit where it's due. The gifts are nice as they all seem to be tailor-made to what each person likes. Like Hugh got a model duck that looks like an alien, and of course that appeals to him. Nick got a hoverboard, which honestly, that is pretty cool. And Sam, the guy who runs the candy shop, wound up getting a toupee because he's bald. So, you know, everyone's just kind of going for it. The problem, however, is that not only is everyone in Retroville immediately like, well, obviously the Yokians are here to be friends now, let's just let them stay with us, but they also begin openly mocking Jimmy because he's still suspicious of the Yokians. And I mean, everyone begins openly mocking Jimmy, because he still believes the Yokians are up to something, and yet everybody in Retroville just begins openly taunting him. Not just the children, but the adults too. I'm not kidding. They're all making fun of Jimmy because he's not buying what the Yokians are selling. And while I could buy that the kids would be ones that would be more willing to mock Jimmy, because as we've seen in both the movie and in other episodes of the series, Jimmy does still find himself as the victim of ridicule every now and then. The adults should have firmer heads on their shoulders. Yeah, the adults have exaggerated personalities too because, kids cartoon, but at the very least, the adults do seem to at least recognize when Jimmy is kind of in the right here. And so seeing them all basically just go, "Oh, Jimmy, you just don't understand. These people are obviously friendly," even though the last time Retroville encountered this very specific species, they were all almost fed to a giant chicken, is just dumb. It's dumb. Yeah, I'm gonna blow the lid on it right now. This plot is the major reason I do not like this episode. It's an idiot plot. Literally, every single character except for Jimmy in this episode is holding the idiot ball and refusing to drop it. And that is a problem in my opinion, because in order for any of this to go over, everybody just has to have laser-guided amnesia, because every single character in this episode, aside from Jimmy himself, just immediately eats up the shit that the Yokians are putting in front of them. And I can hear a lot of people out there arguing, well, it's a kid's show. You gotta give it the benefit of the doubt here. Except this is still stupid and makes no sense in the context of anything. Yeah, everyone's still suspicious of the Yokians at the beginning of the episode, but one act of generosity does not a good person make. And I feel like that the fact that the episode is just kind of glossing over that and making everybody in Retroville look dumb just so that Jimmy can be the one that proves that they be the one that ends up coming out the hero, I think is stupid. And I find that to be bad writing. Again, it's basically trying to prop Jimmy up by making everybody else fall short. It's basically making everyone else look good, or making everyone else look bad so that Jimmy can look good. And I'm going to be honest here, that's stupid. Because here's the thing. While Jimmy throughout the show has typically been the one who's been able to solve most of the problems, the other characters have showcased their strengths as well. Cindy Vortex may be egotistical and constantly wants to one-up Jimmy because she thinks she's better than him, but she is a competent character. She is a smart kid. And when she and Jimmy are able to collaborate, they are able to accomplish some genuinely great things. And when things are outside of her range of speciality, she does defer to Jimmy and recognize that his intelligence is a necessity for fixing whatever problems come about. And then of course, there's Carl and Sheen. Carl and Sheen may be the lovable, goofy, dumbass sidekicks for Jimmy, but they have their own strengths as well. Carl may be a little bit slow, but he's also affable and tends to be the guy that has his feet firmly planted on the ground. And so it allows him to kind of bring common sense to everything, even though plenty of times he ends up being the butt of the joke because Jimmy uses him for all his experiments. And Sheen, while he's definitely hyperactive and has weight and has definitely too much sugar in his veins, at the very least, Sheen is accomplished and definitely can actually do anything that he sets his mind out to. Sometimes his very specific niche allows him to think of things and possibilities that even Carl and Jimmy don't even think about. Keep in mind that in the episode where Jimmy and Sheen got trapped in his favorite video game, he was still able to figure things out and was actually able to get out of it. Yeah, it was a niche thing that he specialized in, but basically put Sheen in the right circumstances, and he can be a boon rather than a hindrance. So I think so the fact that basically everybody else is the fact that we even have characters like that being stupid and just not recognizing the obvious trap right in front of them is just so dumb. And to make matters worse, again, it's that everybody is mocking Jimmy. Because here's the thing. Jimmy has solved a lot of problems throughout the show. Yes, it's pointed out that plenty of those problems were things that Jimmy caused. But the fact that Jimmy went above and beyond to fix his mistakes and help the town, regardless of his fault, regardless of whether he was at fault or not, shows just how trustworthy and competent Jimmy is. Hell, when a meteorite was crashing down to the Earth, the mayor of Retroville went to Jimmy and told him, hey, I need you to fix this. Or likewise, when Miss Fowl was turned into a giant monster, when the government came in to try and shoot her down, Jimmy was able to call the general in charge and told him to stand down, meaning that even the government recognizes that when Jimmy Neutron is on the case, it's best to let him do his own thing. So it feels so idiotic that fucking everybody is giving Jimmy the cold shoulder. Because yes, like I said, the Yokians are clearly up to something. The episode does not try to hide it. But yet everyone's just like, oh, pshaw, they're good people now. Jimmy doesn't know what he's talking about. No, he's the only one that's actually written competently in this episode. Everyone else should be just as suspicious. And look, I'm going to say this right now. Even if you give the Yokians the benefit of the doubt, and it turns out that they were up to nothing this entire episode, if they were genuine and earnest in their desire to want to make amends for their past and actually become good people, Jimmy's suspicion would still be valid, because the last time that Jimmy and the rest of Retroville, for that matter, encountered the Yokians was when the Yokians came down to Earth and kidnapped every adult in Retroville with the intent on feeding them to their god. And likewise, when the children went to Yokis to try and save their parents, they were locked up and the plan was for them to just be held in captivity for the rest of their lives until they were ripe enough to be fed to Pultra. Meaning that these guys were they were pretty much just monsters who, and when everyone tried escaping from them, they hunted them down and tried to blast them right out of the fucking sky. Ergo, I don't think Jimmy would be out of line for still being suspicious of them. Now, to be fair, the Yokians do stoke the fires a bit, which we'll get back to when I get back to talking about the plot summary. But ultimately, regardless of whether the Yokians were telling the truth or not, they would still need to go to a lot of effort just to be able to prove, even to Jimmy, that they were on the up and up. And so Jimmy still being suspicious is not something that I feel should be mocked. And again, I understand, it's a kid's cartoon. Of course, some things are going to be simplistic. But honestly, I think even if it's a kid's cartoon, that's no excuse for having the characters written like fucking dumbasses just for the sake of making your main character look good. It's dumb. I don't like it. And I'm sorry to say, that's the majority of the conflict throughout the entire episode. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good at all. It basically makes everyone else look bad so that Jimmy Neutron looks good, which I know I said already, but it bears repeating. It's stupid, and I don't like it, and it's a major reason why I don't like this episode. And I will get back onto this tangent. Trust me. But with that out of the way, back to the plot summary. Basically, Retroville takes the Yokians in with almost no issue whatsoever. Hell, they even have some of the Yokians move in with them. I'm not even joking. Jimmy returns to his house, and his parents have invited fucking Goobot right into their den. Well, okay, not their den, it's a guest room, but still, you think that Jimmy's parents, the people who warned him about talking to strangers and whose warnings were blatantly ignored and ultimately brought these aliens here, would be the ones who are more trusting of their son? You think that they would understand? Maybe Jimmy knows more about this. No. They're very much holding the idiot stick in this episode as well. Okay. I don't know, it's just so dumb. But it's also here we learn a bit more about what the hell King Goobot is after. After Hugh begins showing King Goobot all the wonders of the Earth, which in this case is a telephone and a TV remote, King Goobot asks if they have something like, I don't know, a DNA regenerator, and basically Hugh tells him they don't have anything like that lying around, but there would be one in Jimmy's lab. He's got all the latest technology. Although before King Goobot can inquire more about that, Hugh pulls him away because he wants to talk his ear off about pie, which I'll actually give credit where it's due. I kind of like this. It's a running gag throughout the episode where King Goobot is trying to do his evil plan, but Hugh pulls him away to just talk about whatever, and Hugh just at no point gets the hint that King Goobot does not want to talk about it. I kind of like that. I'll give it credit. That's actually kind of funny. But yeah, even with that in mind, the Yokians continue basically kind of interweaving themselves into the fabric of Retroville, and taking jobs from people like teaching or window washing or menial labor. Hell, they even end up becoming fucking police officers and fucking politicians. I'm not even kidding. There's a later scene in the episode where Jimmy goes to the army, and literally everyone in charge are Yokians now. They were very thorough, and it makes me wonder if they stayed in those positions after the Yokians left. Kind of wish they were. That'd be funny. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Point is, the Yokians have basically interwove themselves into Retroville, and while Jimmy does try to rally some of his friends to try and find a way to throw them off, again, they drunk the Kool-Aid and they don't want to listen to Jimmy at all. Again, ignoring everything that happened in the movie, but let's not beat that dead horse quite yet. So, but ultimately, King Goobot and Ooblar realize that if they want the DNA regenerator, they need to get access to Jimmy's lab. And since Jimmy is obviously not going to open the door for them, they need to find another way in, which is where Cindy comes in, as they go to Cindy and basically feed her ego, so to speak, as they make her believe that she's the smartest in class, that she's obviously smarter than Jimmy, and in a rare show of modesty, Cindy does admit that, well, she's not that smart. Jimmy gets the highest grades in class, but Ooblar and Goobot just tell her that he only gets those good grades because he has a lab, and that if Cindy had a lab, she would be the top student in class. And that manages to feed Cindy's ego enough that she's more willing to listen to Goobot and Ooblar. And basically what they want Cindy to do is help them get access to Jimmy's lab, under the pretense that if they can get access to it, then they can make one for Cindy as well. However, for some reason, Cindy doesn't know how to get into Jimmy's lab, which I find stupid considering that in previous episodes she's been to Jimmy's lab, so there's a good chance that she probably does know how to get into the damn thing. But that's the most minor of issues in this episode, so I'll let it slide for now. But at the very least, she does know a couple of people who do know how to get into Jimmy's lab, and those people are Carl and Sheen, who she manages to bribe by inviting them to the candy bar and buying them all the treats they can stuff down their gullets. And as such, she manages to coax out of Carl and Sheen that in order to get into Jimmy's lab, they need a strand of his hair, since the door to his lab is on his clubhouse, and in order to access the door, you need a strand of Jimmy's genetic structure and hold it up to the scanner by the clubhouse door. As such, Cindy relays this information to King Goobot, and well, King Goobot does exactly what he wanted to do, as he sneaks into Jimmy's lab and steals the DNA regenerator. Why is that? Well, let's get into other parts of the episode. So going back to how Jimmy is trying to prove to Retroville that the Yokians are not on the up and up, he puts this King Goobot's statement of they come in peace through Goddard's lie detector, and yeah, it's proven that it's false. And well, when Jimmy tries to present his findings to the town, he finds that everybody in town has gone to the main park of Retroville because apparently there's a giant egg that was set up by the Yokians. And so when Jimmy goes to the egg, thinking that it's Pultra who's there to eat the town, well, the egg explodes, and inside are a bunch of invitations to a picnic that's going to be happening the next night. And everyone in Retroville is invited to it. And as such, this makes everyone just go, oh, they're of course nice. They're gonna just give us a picnic. That's nice. And well, immediately the Yokians try making Jimmy look bad by going, oh, well, if Jimmy doesn't think we're to be trusted, then maybe we shouldn't have this picnic. We wouldn't want him to feel upset. And of course, that just gets the entire town to turn on Jimmy. And I'll actually give credit where it's due. We do get some extra bit of trolling from King Goobot here, as Hugh tries to get Jimmy to apologize to him, and King Goobot says, yes, Jimmy, let's shake hands in a show of friendship. And as Jimmy actually almost looks like he is considering shaking his hand, Goobot just basically starts smirking at him evilly, which is basically his way of trying to get Jimmy to react. And I kind of like that. It's some expert trolling there. As such, Jimmy pretty much tells King Goobot to go screw himself as he wanders off, and the town ends up shaming Jimmy. But yeah, that night Jimmy does begin wondering if maybe he is wrong, until through his telescope he spies a Yokian freighter crashing down to Earth. And as such, as he and Goddard go to investigate, well, inside the Yokian freighter, they find a giant water dish for Pultra. So yeah, the Yokians were not lying about that. The Yokians were indeed lying about that. Poltra is still around. Sort of, we'll get to that. But as such, the next day, Jimmy does end up going to confront King Ooblar, and yeah, Ooblar basically just comes clean. Yeah, this is all just one big ploy. And the whole reason why they're doing this whole plan is because, well, after Jimmy basically roasted the Yokians' asses in the movie, well, King Goobot and Co. basically became the laughing stock of the galaxy, and King Goobot basically hates the idea that this random-ass kid from Earth basically showed him up like that. So all of this is basically payback, as the first step of the plan was basically to get all of Retroville to turn against Jimmy so that nobody trusted him no matter what. And as such, Jimmy thinks, okay, fine, you humiliated me, but what's the next step? You can leave now, right? But King Goobot pretty much tells him, oh no, there's going to be something worse in mind. And so he reveals to Jimmy that, yes, the picnic is indeed a ploy, although Jimmy figures that out himself. Basically, what's going to happen is that they're going to invite everyone to the picnic for the sole purposes of them being eaten by Poltra. And the reason why King Goobot is okay with Jimmy knowing this information? Because at this point, nobody in Retroville trusts him. He can go to whoever he wants to and tell them, no, the picnic is a trap, don't go to it, and everyone will still go to the picnic because everyone trusts the Yokians over Jimmy. And so, basically, it means that no matter what happens, everyone's going to die, and Jimmy just has to sit back and watch. Which, again, I'll give credit. I actually kind of like that plan. I do actually kind of like the idea of the villains turning everyone against the hero, and basically the villains basically in private telling the hero, oh yeah, we're playing everybody, and you're gonna have to watch as they all die because they trust us over you. I kind of like that plan. I think it's a good plan. Except in the case of how it's implemented in this episode. So yeah, I'm gonna go on another tangent here. So, believe it or not, this plot was kind of done again in another show that I watch, Doctor Who. Specifically, there was one episode of the modern series wherein the Doctor was called by Winston Churchill, and basically the Doctor landed the TARDIS in Britain in World War II. And the reason why Churchill called the Doctor was because he had a new weapon he wanted to show off to the Doctor, which in this case were these miniature ultimate battle tanks were supposed to be able to wipe out any of Britain's enemies. But in reality, though, the battle tanks were actually one of the Doctor's greatest longtime foes, the Daleks. And, of course, the Doctor, being the Doctor, knew that the Daleks were here, they were clearly up to something. But the thing is, though, the Daleks basically went to the extra mile to cover their tracks here. As their cover story here was that they were invented by a scientist, and there's even a scientist on Churchill's payroll who claims he invented these battle tanks. So it basically backs up the story. And throughout the entire episode, the Daleks are docile. They do whatever anyone tells them to do. And they are basically perfect soldiers, as they're shooting down Nazis right out of the sky, probably one of the only good things they would ever do. And if anyone asks them to bring them refreshments or drinks, they'll do it, no questions asked. And so it all comes to a head when the Doctor finally just outright confronts the Daleks and basically wants them to know what the hell they're up to. And it turns out that the Doctor basically calling the Daleks out was their end goal. As you see, the Daleks are now scarcer in number right now, and even the few Daleks we're seeing here weren't really pure Daleks. They were partially human. And so to try and restore the Dalek race to what it once was, these Daleks gain access to a pod which is supposed to be able to reconstitute, rebuild, and basically enhance the Dalek species. But the problem was that because these Daleks weren't pure, the machine wouldn't let them access it, and they needed to actually confirm to the machine that they were indeed Daleks. And who better to confirm that than the Daleks' greatest enemy, the Doctor? And so when the Doctor confronted the Daleks and confirmed what they were, the Daleks basically got what they wanted. They immediately dropped the act, ditched everything, and went back up into their spaceship in order to give the machine the recording of the Doctor calling them out. Now again, different outcome from what we have in this episode of Jimmy Neutron, of course, but the thing is, it is a very similar plan. One of the main hero's greatest enemies basically playing possum and showing themselves the hero, knowing full well that the hero sees right through the disguise, and yet they keep the act going just to try and troll the hero into doing what they want him to do. And I thought, honestly, I liked that episode for that. I thought it was clever and it was brilliant. But the thing is, I like it more in that episode of Doctor Who versus what we have here for one very big reason. The people the Daleks were actually trying to fool had no idea who the Daleks were. In that episode, the Daleks appeared at a point in time where no one in human history should know what the hell a Dalek is. Obviously, Winston Churchill wouldn't know what the Daleks are, his staff wouldn't know what the Daleks are, and hell, to try and prop up the Daleks' cover story, there's a guy running around saying, oh yeah, these are my inventions, I made them, even though even he has no idea that he's an artificial human that the Daleks created to try and, to try and give their story some authenticity. But ultimately, the plan works because everybody else involved in the plot does not know that these things are these killer monstrosities who will shoot you just because you're not one of them. And so it makes the plan work out better because both the Doctor and the audience know the Daleks are up to something, but we don't know what. And so when the Doctor finally confronts the Daleks because he's sick of just pretending everything's fine, it makes the reveal of what the Daleks were planning that much more terrifying. Because ultimately they were just baiting the Doctor to try and get what they wanted. But in the case of this episode, the reason why I still don't like the episode, even though I will give props that I like the underhanded nature of basically the villains trolling the hero, is because, again, the fucking idiot plot. Yeah, I will give props that I like the plan that the Yokians are pulling. I think it's creative and it's evil and basically just pours salt on the wound in the best way possible that reminds you why these guys are such assholes. But again, the only reason it works in this episode is because everybody else is written stupid. If everybody was written how they were supposed to be written in the show, then this plot would have never worked. It would have been a hell of a lot better if, maybe Jimmy was on another planet or something and encountered the Yokians and he told this other race, no, don't trust those guys, they're evil, and the Yokians basically still put up the same act. And likewise Jimmy and whoever else of a supporting cast were there would basically be trying to convince this other race the Yokians were not on the up and up, but the other race would be like, well, why are you talking about? They've been nothing but nice to us since they got here. I don't know why you're so paranoid about them. And that would actually make more. And honestly, I feel like that would be a lot more entertaining. Or maybe you could take this plot and work it a different way. Maybe the audience isn't in the know. Maybe they don't. Maybe from the beginning you make it look like the Yokians are genuine. Maybe have it be that the Yokians are genuinely. Make it look like the Yokians are being genuine. Every time we see them, maybe they are acting nice. Maybe we see a few things here or there that seem odd, but for the most part, they look like they're genuine and actually trying their best to put their best foot forward. Again, they have no feet, they're floating eggs, and trying to clearly make amends. And as such, throughout the episode, we're left wondering if Jimmy's suspicions are true or not. And likewise, I think it would have been better too. Maybe all the other characters were probably just as suspicious of Jimmy, but we're at least willing to kind of let the Yokians in a little. Yeah, you did some horrible shit, but if you're willing to, but if you really are trying to make amends and none of it was your fault, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt a little bit. Wouldn't it have been better if everyone in Retroville was just as suspicious of the Yokians as Jimmy, but they were more willing to give them a shot? I think it would have been better. And likewise, as Jimmy begins questioning his own judgment, maybe that's when things start kind of coming to a head. As at this point, the Yokians do something grand and nice that wins over all of Retroville, in this case, the giant egg, and so while Jimmy is still suspicious, it does kind of get him more alienated from the rest of the town, as the rest of the town are like, I don't know, I think maybe they are on the up and up, I think you're just a little paranoid kid, which honestly might be more which probably would still be a stupid plot, but at the very least, it would still give more credence, and would even get the audience questioning a little if the Yokians are being genuine in what they're trying to do. And then likewise, when you get to the final third of the episode, and we see that the Yokians really were lying, as we see the Yokian freighter coming to Earth with Pultra's dish, that's when we learn, oh, okay, so they were lying from the start. That would have helped clue us in. And as such, I think it would have made the reveal that much more satisfying. And instead, it's basically just a little wink to the audience going, oh no, they're still evil, see, they're still evil, and Jimmy's the only one that can see it, even though everybody else should be fucking suspicious, but hey, let's again not beat that fucking dead horse. My point is this. I will give credit, I like the troll plot. It's a good plot, and I do like plots where the villains basically play the hero by letting them in on the secret, knowing that if they told anyone, no one would believe them. It's just the only reason it works in this episode is because everybody is written like they're fucking morons. And that, as a result, does not make the episode entertaining for me. And again, and I'm still saying all this, even though we're still not done with the plot summary. I'm sorry, this episode just pisses me off that much. Anyway, back to the plot. And either way, after Jimmy and Goobot have their little back and forth, Jimmy does try to warn his fellow students, but predictably, nobody believes him, not even his closest friends. And when Jimmy tries going to authority figures for help, well, like I said, the Yokians have already invaded the police force and the army, so nobody he turns to can help him. As such, Jimmy tries going back to his lab to try and find some answers, but finds that the lab has been sabotaged by King Goobot when he stole the DNA regenerator. And as such, Jimmy begins wondering what the hell King Goobot wants with it. Well, it turns out they want to use it to regrow Pultra. So, it turns out the Yokians weren't entirely lying when they said Pultra wasn't around anymore. He ditched them! Yeah, apparently after the events of the movie, Pultra decided to ditch the planet of Yokis out of sheer shame. I kind of love that. He left all the Yokians, and went to be the god of some other planet in another galaxy, which I kind of love, as when King Goobot is talking about Pultra leaving, Ooblar actually mentions that, and Goobot has to shush him, which I love that, which also kind of early because I forgot to mention it earlier. Yeah, King Goobot and Ooblar are not voiced by Patrick Stewart and Martin Short in this show. I understand why they wouldn't be able to probably get them, as they're both bigger names, and this is just a children's cartoon on Nickelodeon. But it's you can tell. You can tell. I'm not going to say the acting for these two are bad as a result of the change in cast, because the actors they got to replace, Patrick Stewart and Martin Short are doing their best to try and do impressions of them, and they do fine enough. It's just that it's noticeable. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Anyway, basically what's going on is that since Pultra ditched the Yokians, well, King Goobot wants to grow another Pultra, as he does have one of Pultra's toenails, and he wants to put it in the DNA regenerator to basically grow a second Pultra. And that's exactly what they do, as they put it in the DNA regenerator, which looks like a microwave because Jimmy made it, and sure enough, it sends the genetic material from the toenail into one of those basically washing machine things that Jimmy has, and sure enough, from this washing machine is a new Pultra who is ready to feast. And Jimmy ends up seeing Pultra as it begins making its way to the picnic, and so Jimmy immediately rushes to said picnic to warn all of Retroville. However, when he does get there and tries to warn everyone, again, nobody believes him. And even when he tells them that they stole the DNA regenerator from his lab, even Hugh's like, that's impossible, because obviously they need to be able to get access to Jimmy's lab, and nobody can get in there. However, when Cindy hears that they were able to steal it from his lab, she immediately realizes that she kind of dropped the ball on this one, because she told the Yokians how to get in. And as such, while Jimmy is almost booed off the stage, immediately Cindy comes up and begins vouching for Jimmy, basically telling everybody that they need to trust him right now. That, yeah, he's caused plenty of problems in the town, but he's also fixed all those problems as well. He's always had the Retroville's back, so maybe they should give him their trust. And as a result, when everyone realizes that one of Jimmy's biggest critics is telling the town maybe we should listen to him, they all start beginning to turn around and realize maybe they should be trusting the kid who saved their lives on multiple occasions. And even the few detractors who don't trust Jimmy are quickly convinced he's on the up and up when they hear Pultra coming. As such, upon the realization that the giant chicken is back and ready to eat them all, everybody tries running away from the picnic, But the Yokians have prepared for this, as it turns out that surrounding the picnic are all these gates, and, well, they end up locking all the gates, pretty much trapping everyone inside. As such, everyone begins freaking out because how the hell are they going to take on Poltra? And, well, one brain blast later, Jimmy figures out how to do it. Because, you see, apparently chickens can't burp. So, well, he just needs to try and get some, needs to get some carbonation in that giant chicken's belly. As such, he tasks the town with getting any fizzy rock pop candies that they can, while also getting everyone to basically pour as much purple flurp as they can into Poltra's dish, which was brought out when the charade was dropped with the Yokians. And as such, as everyone begins filling up the bowl with purple flurp, Jimmy is able to get the pop rocks, and, well, he has Cindy and Libby sew together some clothes to make a dummy, and puts it around the barrel of pop rocks. Why? Well, they need to get Poltra to burp, so they need to get Poltra a reason to drink. As such, everyone goes into hiding, and Poltra arrives on the scene with him getting spotlights thrown on him because I guess the Yokians were there and just let the humans do whatever they wanted. Fucking morons. But regardless, Poltra arrives, and Poltra does end up eating the dummy, which basically dries out Poltra's throat to the point where Poltra needs a drink. So Poltra begins gulping down the purple flurp, and, well, the carbonation does what Jimmy suspected it would, as his belly begins rumbling, and apparently he explodes. Okay. So, yeah, town is now saved, Poltra is dead, and so everyone begins cheering for Jimmy, but as for the Yokians themselves, well, since their plan is pretty much a bust, they decide a tactical retreat is in order, as everyone is now believing Jimmy again, so obviously that part of the plan is spoiled, and hey, everyone is alive, so they're probably going to be a little pissed. So, literally all the Yokians load themselves up into this giant egg, where they literally flush themselves out of their bodies, with Ublar telling everybody that all of their gifts that they got were made from alien weasel vomit. Go figure. And of course, and ultimately, as the giant egg flies away, King Goobot once more swears vengeance on Jimmy and says he'll be back. Blah 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 blah. But either way, Jimmy, with everything said and done, Jimmy does want to go back to his lab to try and, unsabotage it. Before he does, Cindy and Libby call him on stage as all the town pretty much come together to tell Jimmy that he was right, they were wrong. And while Jimmy tries to be modest and say, no, it's fine, some healthy skepticism is natural, well, he does decide to rub it in a little. And you know what? He deserves it. Everyone was an asshole in this episode. As such, everyone apologizes, and to celebrate the fact that nobody's dead, everyone begins partying at the picnic. Although Jimmy has basically figured out that Cindy was the one that told the Yokians about where his lab was, so he ends up erasing her short-term memory so she doesn't remember how to get into the lab, so there you go. But, yeah, the episode ends with everyone partying and celebrating, and basically with fireworks abound. They even have a nice song to it, so it's good. So it's nice. It's a nice victory. So there you go. But yeah, like I kept saying throughout this entire vlog, I don't like this episode. I will give credit where it's due. There are parts of it that I can appreciate. Like I said, I do like the fact that the Yokians have come back for this episode, as it's actually nice to acknowledge that the Jimmy Neutron movie is still a part of the story, and so it's nice to see aspects of it revisited. In this case, it's nice to see the bad guys from that episode coming back and giving Jimmy problems, showcasing that they weren't just one-off characters, and that they are going to come back and try and give Jimmy problems because, well, he basically waged war with an entire species, and the king of these people is a narcissistic asshole who can't stand the fact that this teeny-weeny little child basically outsmarted him. So I kind of like that. And I like seeing them go forth. And I like seeing them go forth to try and get their revenge on Jimmy. Likewise, I do actually like the plot. I actually do like the villain's plot. Yeah, I still listed my problems with it because it relies on the people of Retroville being stupid, but it is a rather ingenious plot for a villain. Basically, have the villains just, and try and gain the trust of everyone that the hero knows and loves. Basically, let the hero in on their plan and then basically just let everything play out because they know nobody will believe the hero because the bad guys have already earned everybody else's trust. And I like that. It's a nice troll plan. But Nice troll plan. And likewise, there are some jokes and gags throughout the episode that I did genuinely love. Believe it or not, I kind of did like how the Yokians were being a little bit more obvious when they're with their evil intent, which did lead to some funny moments as you can see their bad acting on full display as they're pretending to be all nice and friendly when you can tell that they're in absolute hell trying to do all this just so that their evil king can get his comeuppance, can get his revenge against Jimmy. So I do find that amusing, especially when King Goobot does end up becoming the butt of a joke when Hugh keeps pulling him away to try and be friendly, and King Goobot's like, oh god, will this guy just leave me alone? I like that. I actually think that's funny. I actually do think that's funny. And likewise, I will actually give credit. I do like that the episode does basically call the attention to the fact that everyone was wrong, and I do kind of like that Jimmy does kind of rub it in a little because it was deserved. But unfortunately, these few bits of good do not make up for the bad, and I've gone on full tangents about why I don't like this episode, and yeah, those points still are standing out. I think the plot is idiotic. Some good jokes and good moments here and there do not make up for basically poor writing. As like I said, the only reason this episode even happens at all is because everyone in Retroville collectively is a goddamn moron. They're just willing to accept this alien race back without any form of trust being built, just because they came in, said, "Oh, our evil chicken god was the one that made us bad. So here's some gifts. We're friends now." And on top of that, the fact that they kept ostracizing Jimmy, despite the fact that he has put his ass on the line to save them time and again, is just so dumb. It's just so flipping dumb. Even to the point where his fucking parents are siding with the Yokians. The people that told him not to talk to strangers and face the direct consequences of their son disobeying their orders. Yeah, they're just like, oh yeah, they're good now. I don't like that. It's dumb. And the fact that the episode keeps hoisting it to the forefront in order to make the plot go forward is also dumb. Like I said, and I kept repeating, it makes everyone else look bad so that Jimmy looks good. And that's not how you should be writing a story like this. If you want to have Jimmy be propped up like that, have it be something that's a more understandable. Have the misunderstanding be something more understandable. Have it be something that that everyone else would probably be in the right for assuming that maybe things weren't up in the air. So even if Jimmy was the one that still kept questioning it, at the very least have things be more reasonably explained rather than just, oh, we needed if we didn't write it this way then the plot wouldn't have happened. Because if you have to write a story like that in order to make it work, well, guess what? You wrote a bad story, okay? I'm sorry, I don't like it. And while I will still give credit that I like the Yokians' plan, it's overly reliant on everybody being written like a goddamn idiot. And I'm sorry, I don't find that entertaining. And I'm not going to just brush this under the rug because it's a kid's show. That doesn't fly in my eyes. There's plenty of things you can handwave in the show because it's a kid's show. And in those regards, it can make the episode work. But in those cases, it's not a matter of bad writing that you can just hand wave and ignore. It's just fun, silly stuff. How the science of everything, how it can all work, and that I've made jokes in several videos about how, or possibly just inferred that Jimmy and his family may have ties to the government because, well, Jimmy's this extraordinary kid with an IQ so high that he has a fucking lab beneath his house, and yet he still goes to everyday school. But even with reading between the lines, you can still ignore the logic of things a little because it just makes for a fun premise for a kids show, and it's fun seeing it executed. But then when you have an episode like this where everybody just does a complete 180 in how they're written just because you want to make your main character look like the smartest guy in around, I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept that. I think that's poor writing, and it just makes for an episode that, in my opinion, is dumb. It's a dumb episode, and I'm sorry, it doesn't do it for me. I think this episode was a mistake. It was not something that should have been... If you wanted to do an episode like this, you needed to do it in a better way. Maybe provide more reasonable doubt for Jimmy. Make it be so that maybe the audience isn't let in like Jimmy is. Maybe make it less obvious that the Yokians are evil. Maybe drop some hints here and there, but nothing too obvious. Just things that seem inconspicuous on their own, like a little isolated incidents that would make you tilt your head a little, but not enough for you to go, aha, they're evil. I think that could have been better. But the fact that we were presented with the episode in the way we were, it's just not good. It's just not a good episode in my eyes, and it does not make for a good special. And as a result, I'm kind of glad that the episode is where it is, because it seems a little weird that this episode is framed like it is, because, as I've said, there have been episodes in Jimmy Neutron that have been clearly aired out of order. We saw that here and there in previous episodes, like with the stuff with the time booth. But I think it's more obvious here as well, because I suspect that the episode we're watching right now, that the Eggpire Strikes Back, was meant to be the season finale. Because in some ways it feels like it's more of a culmination of things, especially in regards to them referencing both the movie and events that have happened throughout the series so far. So I feel like in those cases you can give a suitable explanation. Those would provide reasonable explanation. I feel like and combine that with the, like I said, 44-minute runtime, or 42 minutes. I might be mincing hairs there. You can at least, it does feel more grand. It feels like more of a culmination. But the fact that it's aired here as episode 15, when the real finale is like 4 episodes away, it feels a little out of place, is what I'm saying. So I'm under the impression that maybe this episode was aired out of order, and hell, maybe some episodes of season 2 were aired as part of season 1, which we'll get to. Trust me on that. But I don't know. I feel like this was supposed to be the season finale, but honestly, even if it was just the season finale, okay, actually, I'll give you this. At the very least, it does feel like it could have been a culmination of the series up to this point. Like I said, referencing the movie, referencing past events, and having the town rally behind Jimmy because of all the victories he's had in the past, and how much effort he's gone to try and help everybody. It's just that, again, I can't give this episode a free pass. It's not I think the plot is stupid. I think the writing is stupid, and the bad guys only get as far as they do in this episode because everybody is written like a goddamn moron. And as a result, I just don't like this. I just don't like this episode. There are aspects of it that I can honestly say that I enjoy. But as a whole, I think this episode is just not worth your time. It's not entertaining, it's not fun, it's not enjoyable, it's actually aggravating in a few areas. On the whole, despite what I like about it, you're better off just skipping this episode. I don't think you'd be missing that much. Maybe some things come back in later episodes, I don't know. But for what it is, the Eggpire Strikes Back is honestly not as special as the series would want you to think it is. So there you go. If you liked it, now I want to say this though, if you liked the episode, more power to you. I'm not going to shame you for liking the episode. Just because I don't like it doesn't mean you have to not like it as well. If there was something in there that you enjoyed, and if you can get past everyone basically insulting Jimmy, then maybe you'll find something that I didn't see. And if you do like it, and if you do find that, good on you. Keep enjoying it. But I personally don't care for it. So there you go. But with all that out of the way, next week we're going to go back to our regular 2 segments per episode thing. So, well, hopefully next time we'll have a much shorter vlog as a result of that. And next week's episodes are actually ones that I very much enjoy. I think they're very fun. I think they're very fun episodes, and one of them definitely has a WTF ending, so I'm looking forward to that. But till then, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I'm Samuel Johnson, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Take care.